This is our first video lecture for Humanities 2. I'll be uploading at least one of these per week, and as usual, they will focus on things that aren't in your textbook or things that I want to emphasize or comment on that are in the book. You will be responsible for this. I'll do something, I don't know, quizzes or what. Last time I did this, I spent like 20 hours doing video lectures, and at the end of the class, I noticed that like 3 people had actually viewed them, which was not a great day for me. Um, but this will be us going forward, and what I typically do for an online class. The next chapter in our book that we're looking at will be on the Romantics and the Romantic movement in art, literature. Um, uh, it's a movement in art, just like the Baroque. And movements in art are when enormous shifts take place in the artistic world, and different things are emphasized. Different styles, different techniques become ascendant. And the Romantics are a big departure from the Baroque or the Rococo. Um, or classical art. Now, your classical artists are with us forever. They're classical artists, harkening back to the values of the Greeks, continue to our very day. And there's this kind of general ongoing war between the classical artists and everybody else. But in the Romantics, the age of the Romantics, the Romantic artists developed a different perspective, and their focus was primarily on emotion and um, nature and the experience of emotion in nature. This is what they were focused on, what they were about. Um, and that debate, or that conflict between them and the classical artists, was won by the Romantics to such a degree that today we take all of their values for granted. We all privilege emotion over pretty much anything else. The phrase, the heart wants what the heart wants, for instance, is a Romantic era invention. Um, we tend to decide our lives by whether or not we emotionally feel this or that. And we spend a great deal of time um, finding ways to feel emotions more intensely. It's not an accident that most of the iconic monsters of our um, lexicon of horror, right, comes from the Romantics. They invented Frankenstein and Dracula and the Wolfman. I've got some supplemental material for you in the supplemental materials section. I really want you guys to access that because I did a lot of work on it. Um, but uh, one of the things I talk about there is the fact that all of these monsters were invented on the same day by Lord Byron and his friends on one afternoon when they were hanging out at his place. They had a contest to see who could come up with the scariest monster, and Dracula and Frankenstein evolved out of that. Um, they were, especially in England, a tight-knit group of people that knew one another and all were working towards the same sort of ends in art. Um, it was not unusual at all for them to be hanging out together and partying together, and they did party. And that's another thing that I want to emphasize here is that these guys are the archetypes. They're the great-grandfathers of our modern-day rock stars. For them, it was sex, drugs, and poetry. As for us, it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Rock and roll didn't exist at that time, but they were beginning to invent it. Um, Paganini is one of the first of the virtuoso kind of proto-rock star musicians. He was a violin player. He dressed all in black and looked sinister, and he would get up on stage with his violin and do things that no one had ever seen done with a violin before. He's the first of these people, really. Think about classical music. Up until this point, the major stars, the focus of the celebrity of music was the composer, the person who wrote the music. And the musicians were just there to uh, put the composer's vision into action. Um, Paganini was really the first musician to be famous for himself, not for some other composer's work, but for his virtuosity, for his stage persona. Right? He was a celebrity musician, and he would get up without an orchestra, just him and his violin, and play, and blew people's minds. A rumor began to circulate that Paganini had sold his soul to the devil for the ability to play the violin. Does that sound familiar, right? That's Robert Johnson's story, which we'll get to when we get to the blues and the contributions of America to popular music and culture. But there have been a lot of artists that have this kind of sinister, satanic sort of thing. There's something about that. And the Romantics were very much enamored of the devil in certain ways that we recognize now, right? Just as the Rolling Stones call themselves satanic majesties of rock and roll, Paganini was not doing anything to discourage this belief that he was in league with the devil. And the Romantics as a whole really uh, had what they called a Dionysian outlook on life. And Dionysus is the ancient Greek myth of the guy that gives fire to people. So this ancient Greek myth is that how human beings got the use of fire was that Dionysus, Prometheus. I wish I'm getting wrong. I'm not going to go back and edit. Right? If I get attacked by a cat or make a mistake, I'm not going to go back and start over. It's hours and hours of my life. Right? Prometheus, not Dionysus. Dionysus was a god of revelry and certainly something that the Romantics would be all about. But Dionysus was the guy that gave fire to human beings, stole it from the gods and gave it to people, and for that was punished by the gods. Um, and he is a satanic figure. The word Lucifer means light bringer. And the Romantics, when they were talking about Prometheus, it was a kind of a euphemism for Satan. Um, just was. And if you look at these guys' lives, right, they bucked all convention. They did not care at all about conventional morality. Most of them were using opium or heroin or you absinthe or whatever it was they were getting stoned on, and they lived fast, died young, and left behind beautiful corpses. I mean, that's what they did. And I've got some, some illustrations of that in your supplemental material, especially over Lord Byron, who was a reprehensible person in every way, shape, or form. A fantastically good-looking person. These guys were very attractive to the people of their time. In the same way that rock and rollers and people like that are attractive to us now. Sex and drugs and poetry. That's what they did. Um, I've also got some other things in there. I've got the two cellos doing Thunderstruck. Right, rock and roll music is very much something that the Romantics would have been all about if they were around in our time. Right, rock and roll is a natural extension of the ideas and the values that the Romantics championed in their day. And so, and one thing I want you to do is question that for a minute, right? Um, is it always true that we should follow our emotions in everything, the way that we think we ought to? Just it's a cultural value that we hold that the Romantics gave us, and it leads to a lot of disasters, right? Um, Byron neglected his daughter because he didn't feel for her. And he says very clearly after her death that then he felt like he needed her. Is that what you do? Is that going to be a responsible way to raise a child? I'm going to pay attention to this child as long as I feel these emotions of love and attachment and so forth and so on. If I don't feel those emotions, heck with it. Byron did that to the detriment of his own daughter and lots of people around him. I think it's a value that we should probably think about and question to some degree. Um, if you're going to be led by emotion, especially romantic emotion, you're going to have a chaotic life. And one of my personal values, one of the ways that I make judgments about all the different art and stuff that comes my way, that I immerse myself in as a scholar and as a teacher, I ask myself, how did this work out for the people doing it, right? If their lives are full of pain and destruction and disaster, maybe we should take a critical look at the values and the things that they communicate in their art. Um, Socialism, not socialism, communism made people miserable. It was a murderous thing. You look at their art, which we will in a bit, right? We get to the end of the semester, we'll look at Soviet art. It's terrible, right? I don't say terrible. Most Soviet buildings look like something Sauron would have made for a reason, right? It's like, that might tell us something about that particular ideology, that worldview. I got in a lot of trouble for this when I was in college. This isn't a cool attitude to have towards art, and at least in my day, there was a lot of appreciating it for its own sake, and not paying attention to how it affected the people who did this artwork personally. That was considered kind of off limits. We were meant to observe the work in isolation from these other things, and for me, that's just, I think, kind of irresponsible, honestly. Um, Anyway, I've spent a lot of time putting this supplemental stuff together. Please access it, look at it. It's pretty cool, I think. There's some interesting things there. I have a comparison between Paganini and Stevie Ray Vaughan, right? Please access this stuff. And I'll post this video up on YouTube, and it'll be in Blackboard, so you'll be able to see it in Blackboard under supplemental material. That's where you'll find it. And we will roll on as we go through the semester. Keep up with the readings. I know I only have one due date for this week for the reading. I will be posting more of them as we go along. I will constantly be putting things in course announcements, updating you guys, any changes, if I get sick, right, all sorts of things. Pay attention to that stuff. And if you need to get in touch with me, do so. Use my cell phone number. It's in the syllabus. Use email, use course messages. If you need to talk to me, I want to talk to you. We just have to work a little harder to get that stuff done in this new world that we're living in right now. And this new world isn't going to end anytime soon, so we all better get used to it. You guys will do much better on this with, the Twitter, that social media and Facebook and all. I heard no guy just the other day calling it Spacebook. A boomer, right? I'm on the edge of that generation, so you guys will take this like ducks to water, and I'm all awkward and don't even know. I feel like what do I do with my face when I'm on the camera, right? I don't know. Anyway, that's what's going on. If you get in touch with me, please do, and I'll throw another one of these up next week.